different ratios. For this project, I'm mixing 6 parts of gravel sand mix to 1 part Portland cement. Agitating the rebar as I insert it in the concrete will help the concrete bond to it. With the foundation for the sandstone step complete,
you come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
In the last episode, we took measurements and drew out a plan for our pathway step. I cleared all the old material away and flattened out the dirt so we have a good base to construct the treated timber frame that's going to contain the pavers and our stone step. I'm constructing the frame out of 200mm by 50mm treated timber sleepers. I'm cutting the 4 pieces I need out here in my staging area, but I'll be assembling the frame in place due to its weight when it's all put together. It's important to take a look along the length of the timber to see which pieces are the straightest, and in this case I want to use the straightest pieces for the long parts of the frame. I use my set square to double check the ends of the timber to make sure they're 90 degrees so our frame comes out plumb. This is when the investment of making a drawing with accurate measurements pays off. I'm able to cut all the pieces I need quickly and effectively without wasting any of my material. I always drill pilot holes where I'm fastening the screws to help avoid splitting the timber with the screw. It also helps to make a really accurate and tight join. I've used a clamp to attach one side of my frame to the deck to help support it vertically whilst I assemble the other side.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Daydreamer, kidnap me. Have me running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
Attaching the corner of our frame aligned to the side of the deck. I check with the tape measure to make sure we've got enough room for the step we'll be adding later. With one end of the frame locked into the appropriate height, I adjust some of the dirt under the frame to create a slight slope for rain runoff. These timbers will create the basic structure that the pathway and step is built inside. After adding a piece of timber that's going to help create the form of the foundation of the step, we start adding our gravel base. The gravel will be about 100mm thick due to the softness of the soil.
As a young girl, it feels we're mine. We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the pines. So offshore, playful and free, without a care in the world. I was one rich little girl. Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
Our concrete foundation extra strong, I'm adding reinforcement mesh into it. I'm cutting down this larger piece of mesh so it fits into the formwork of our foundation.
We spent summers catching fireflies and winters on our skates. One big smile across my face. We used to dance our way to church on Sundays. Mama set the pace. Daydreamer, kidnap me.
To help suspend our reinforcement mesh at the right height inside the concrete, I'm adding heavy timber screws into the treated timber formwork. These screws will give me something to anchor the tie wide to, so I can lock the mesh in place and it doesn't move around when we're pouring the concrete. The other purpose of adding these screws into the timber is it's a way of attaching the timber to the concrete. When the concrete sets solid around these screws, it'll make a really solid attachment to the treated timber. I'm getting a measurement for the length of the pieces of reinforcement bar we'll be using to anchor the foundation into our hollow concrete block. Once I've cut the first one to size, I use it as a template to cut the other 6 pieces we're going to need. I need to make some reference marks on the timber so I know where to place the pieces of reinforcement bar we just cut. I want them to end up in the center of the hollow concrete block. By calculating where the edge of the blocks will be sitting in the construction, I can mark an X spot for the center position, and I'll be able to follow this later when we're pouring our foundation. Setting these pieces of rebar deep into our concrete foundation is what's going to create the engineering strength to keep our step attached firmly to the ground. As I finish marking out the pattern for our concrete block, little Gus, the resident dachshund, comes outside to check in with me.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days.
It's always good to take a little break and get present before we move on to our next task. I'm all prepped to do my foundation pour for this stone-clad step we're going to be putting here that goes up to this deck area. I just wanted to explain what's going on with these posts. This is for a wetsuit drying rack, and later we'll be installing a nice piece of steel pipe along here, and because it's under the eaves of the house, it's a really good spot for drying wetsuits and beach towels because we're right next to the beach here. We have to do a concrete pour, so that's why I did the setup, because whilst I'm pouring my foundation out, I wanted to get this concrete in to make the most of getting my concrete mixer all messy. Might as well get 2 pours instead of 1. We'll get some concrete in this end. I've got bracing timber here to support this in exactly the plumb position. I didn't want to put any holes in it, so I've drilled a hole where the bracket's going to go on. Where I've attached this bracing screw is going to be the same place where the bracket goes on with a steel pipe that goes across. So when we remove all this bracing timber and put the bracket on, there won't be any additional holes in this timber. Concrete can be mixed in many different ratios, depending on how hard you want it to be when it sets up. For this project, I'm mixing 6 parts of gravel sand mix to 1 part Portland cement. By adding everything in small amounts relatively slowly, it gives a chance for the ingredients to mix properly with the water. When I'm satisfied the concrete's at the right consistency, I dump it out into my wheelbarrow for transportation to where we're going to be pouring our foundation.
We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the pines. So offshore, playful and free, without a care in the world. I was one rich little girl, daydreamer, kidnap me.
Concrete can stiffen quite quickly, so it's really important to continue agitating the mix as we add more batches. Here I'm using my trowel to push the concrete through the bottom of the rebar mesh and into the corners of our formwork. I added a plywood ramp to assist me in getting the wheelbarrow full of concrete into the right spot for when we dump it.
No mistake ever kept me late. We spent summers catching fireflies and winters on our skates.
By tapping the formwork with a hammer, this creates a vibration that'll help the concrete settle into all the corners of the forms.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
As the concrete fills close to the top of our formwork, it's more practical for me to pour the concrete in from tubs than to use my wheelbarrow. I want to avoid overflowing the concrete and creating a mess. I'm using a sponge to wipe clean the formwork where we put our pencil marks to align our rebar that's going to support the hollow concrete block. Agitating the rebar as I insert it in the concrete will help the concrete bond to it. Here you can see how I'm using the pencil marks to align the rebar in the right position. I complete this process by double checking with my tape measure that all the rebar is sitting at the right height and aligned with our pencil marks. With the foundation for the sandstone step complete, we're now going to move on to pouring the concrete in the foundation for the wetsuit rack post.
As a young girl, it feels we're mine. We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the pines.
The reason this post hole is so elongated is it doubles as a small retaining wall to help support the slope on the side of the pathway.
Daydreamer, kidnap me, take me back, all the way back to them days.
I'm adding crushed bluestone to the top of this foundation to help it blend in with our finished pathway. I'll be using the same material in between the gaps of our pavers. While waiting for the concrete to set up, we're going to prep our hollow concrete block. I'm using my grinder with a diamond bit to cut notches in both sides of the hollow block. This is where a piece of rebar will be fitted in later when we construct the stairs.
Take me back, all the way back to them days, running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
It's important to wash and dampen our bricks and foundation before we start using our mortar. I'm test fitting the piece of rebar that's going to fit in the notches of the hollow block. The little Gus seems to approve. The system I'm using to construct this step is to lay the hollow block on 5mm packers. This gives me a chance to adjust the packers so I can get the block completely level. It's also going to create a gap for the mortar to squeeze between and help adhere the block to the foundation. After leveling the block by adjusting the packers, I double check that it's set back 25mm from the edge of our foundation. I'll need this 25mm setback later for when it comes to the process of adding the stone to the concrete block. With the first block in the appropriate place, I repeat the process with the other 6 blocks, using the pencil marks I put on the timber earlier as a guide.
No mistake ever kept me late. We spent summers catching fireflies and winters on our skates. One big smile across my face. We used to dance our way to church on Sundays. Mama set the pace. Daydreamer, kidnap me, take me back, all the way back to them days, running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
With our hollow block positioned correctly, we're now going to fill them with mortar and concrete. I use the mortar to create a bond with the bottom of the hollow block to the top of the concrete foundation. Because of its soft and smooth consistency, I can push it under the 5mm gap we created with our packers. By adding this mortar to the inside void of the block and agitating it around with my trowel, I push it out through the bottom seam we created with the 5mm packers to create a bond between our foundation and the block. With the mortar acting like a glue at the base of the block, I now add concrete to fill all the voids and in between the blocks. I'm adding the concrete in layers and agitating each layer in before I add the next layer on top. It's important to constantly keep working the concrete, as this will avoid any air voids in our step when it's completed. As the blocks fill with concrete, I make sure to start adding concrete into the gaps between the blocks as well. I'm paying extra attention to fill concrete around the notches we cut earlier in preparation for the piece of rebar we're going to be adding at the last stage. Here you can see how the vertical pieces of rebar we added into our foundation are perfectly centered in our hollow block.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
When the concrete dries, we'll be able to start the process of cladding the step in sandstone. I first need to construct the concrete step on the other side of this deck entryway, as I want to clad both these steps at the same time for efficiency. Because of the soft nature of the sandy soil we're building on, I want to excavate quite a deep foundation for this step. A small step like this needs a lot of masonry mass to keep it stable in the future. I double check the measurement of the hole we've dug to make sure it's big enough for the foundation that's going to support this step. To start the construction of our formwork, I'm going to fix a level beam across the stumps of the existing deck platform. I want to make sure this beam is completely level, as I'll be building the rest of the formwork underneath it, and this will establish the level of the step. This is a fiddly formwork to construct due to the limited access with the deck and the hot water heater right on the corner of our step. So I prefab some of the elements and install them in place. Foundations. The thickness and type of the gravel depends on the soil we're building on, and in this case with the soft sandy soil, I want an extra heavy, thick gravel base. Sometimes when I'm pouring foundations, I integrate recycled concrete chunks into the bottom of the concrete base. This is to help add more masonry mass to the system, which will help our stability later on. I spread out a layer of wet concrete in the bottom of our form and then add the recycled concrete pieces on top. I then top it off with another wet layer of concrete. This will bind all the recycled pieces together in one mass.
We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the pines. So offshore, playful and free, without a care in the world. I was one rich little girl, daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
By using an accelerating agent in the concrete mix, this slab is ready to build on the next day. After the concrete block are laid out on the slab, centering the voids on our pieces of vertical rebar. The next critical part of the process is setting the height of the blocks in relation to the existing deck. After confirming that 15mm of packers will get us to the right height, I do one last double check with my level to make sure we're setting the blocks plumb. I add the mortar mix, making sure that I agitate it through the bottom of the block to create a really good adhesion. This will help hold it solid whilst we add the concrete later. After allowing the mortar to set solid, we fill the steps with concrete and add our rebar just like we did in the first step, in preparation for the cladding of the sandstone, which we'll be doing in the next episode.
Take me back, all the way back to them days. Daydreamer, kidnap me, have me running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
Thanks for joining me this week on my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.